Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and pleased to have in the studio with me Chuck Collins. He is the researcher, campaigner, writer, and senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies, where he co-edits Inequality.org, the website. And he's got a new book out. It's called Born on Third Base. A one-percenter makes the case for tackling inequality, bringing home wealth, and committing to the common good. You can learn about it at Inequality.org, I'm sure, but also, wherever you buy fine books, Born on Third Base. Chuck, welcome to the program.
Great being with you, Thom.
Glad having you with us. We've been talking for years and years. I mean, back to when you and Bill Gates Sr. wrote that brilliant book on the estate tax, and this has been sort of the work of your life, isn't it?
Yeah,
common good
and I've been working on inequality issues, but also trying to engage people who are in the 1%, engage the wealthy around their role that they could play in reducing inequality.
Right. So. You tell a story in the book about talking about how Boeing pays more to their, as I recall, pays more to their executives than they do in taxes or something. There was some, and how a former Boeing executive, or at that time a soon-to-retire Boeing executive, came up to you after a talk. You want to tell us that story and why that is such a great meta frame for the book?
Yeah, he's an older guy who was retired. I thought, uh-oh, he wants to talk to me about what I just said. But he said, I'm actually kind of ashamed that my company takes so much from the American people and pays so little towards our shared infrastructure. And he went on to tell me a story about how he had sort of had his heart cracked open working in Kenya and meeting these children who are orphans who kind of wormed their way into his heart to the point where his whole sort of worldview started to break apart, which was, poverty is a reflection of people's will and deservedness and merit. Choices. And here were children that, for no reason were. So I think he described it as it cracked his heart open, and he came back to suburban Los Angeles and started engaging other retired executives and kind of made this his cause. And really that opened him up to seeing domestic U.S. inequality and poverty in Los Angeles. And for me, it was important because we shouldn't give up on people, I guess, as part of it. There are some pretty hard to reach, unreachable, powerful, wealthy people out there who use their wealth and power to rig the rules. But there's a lot of people who I think we are waiting to be engaged at a different level.
So how do we engage those people?
Well, part of it is to notice the ones that are already in the room. I mean, I'm part of all kinds of organizing efforts, whether it's living wage campaigns or fair taxes. But there are actually privileged people like who grew up in my circumstances, in the room. And there are people sort of not far away waiting to be asked and engaged. Mm-hmm. We have this network called the Patriotic Millionaires, and we had an event last night. And, I think that there are lots of wealthy and thoughtful people, but they don't, just like the rest of us, they don't sort of know how to plug in to the social movements that are emerging and making a difference. So.
Talk about yourself for a little bit. What uniquely qualifies you to write this book? What brought you to this moment?
Well, I had the good fortune to pick wealthy and white parents in suburban Detroit. My great-grandfather had a butcher shop. His name was Oscar Meyer. So 4 generations later, I was pretty much raised in a very, very wealthy, affluent community. So part of it is I know people, and I sort of feel like it's part of my work is to engage and organize people who come from that background.
Yeah. And what kind of, the cliche in the media and in politics is that rich people are selfish and they're all Republicans, and poor people are Democrats and they're all poor, and, et cetera. This is not serving us, is it?
It's not. And part of, I think, the message to wealthy people that we meet or encounter is these extreme inequalities of wealth and the ecological crisis at our door are not good for anybody.
And they're not unconnected.
And they're connected. And, there is no wealth on a degraded earth. There's no wealth with contaminated water and soil. So 1% people, brothers and sisters, it's entirely in your interest to come home, bring your money, out of the offshore tax havens and out of the global financial casino and put it to work locally and give money to organizing and use your voice to speak out to change the trajectory of where we're going.
Yeah. So what sort of response do you get from wealthy people when you say to them, essentially, your wealth is causing some problems?
I think people feel conflicted or guilty, or they don't know what to do. But most people know that there's something deep and systemically wrong, even when they're the beneficiaries of it. Mm-hmm. You know, there's of course really hardcore folks who are very happily living in the myth of individual wealth and deservedness and walling themselves off. But the more people are paying attention, the more their hearts are cracked open by just paying attention to what's going on right now, the more willing they are to be engaged.
There's been a concerted effort for generations, arguably, to circle the wagons on the part of some very wealthy people. I'm thinking of the Walton family having subsidized an effort to change the inheritance tax to the so-called death tax. They spent apparently several $1 million doing that over a number of years, trying to do it in secret. It finally got outed. But that's one of, no doubt, many different efforts. I mean, well, Donald Trump didn't pay taxes for presumably 18 years because somebody gave some money to a politician someplace who put something in the tax code that benefited real estate developers. So there's this whole infrastructure out there. And then you've got you know, I shouldn't always pick on the Koch brothers, but you've basically got this group of very wealthy billionaires who are quasi-libertarian, or full-out libertarian, who believe that you know, your comment, you said you were born to white parents, you were fortunate, you were born into a wealthy family. I mean, they inherited their money from daddy, but somehow it's so comfortable apparently to buy into the Ayn Rand myth. I mean, even what astonished me was even in Atlas Shrugged, Dabney and her brother, they inherited the railroad from daddy. Yeah. You know, they made their money the old-fashioned way. They inherited it, right?
That's right.
And so, but the thing is that these folks, the Kochs and the Waltons and whatnot, they've invested so much money in convincing average working people that the tax laws work the same way for working people as they do for rich people. For example, you know, you know, for working people, if taxes go up, pay tends to go up because people work based on take-home pay, not on pre-tax pay. If taxes go down, wages tend to go down, and we've seen that. You know, we saw that during the Reagan era. For wealthy people, though, if taxes go down, they make more money. It's the exact opposite. Right. How do we cut through that? How do we wake up average people to the notion that what's in the interest of selfish billionaires? And I realize that there's many who are not. There's a lot of good people who are wealthy. But, you know, what's in the interest of selfish billionaires is not in their interest.
Well, one of the reasons I wrote this book is that there are all these stories, and they're the counter story to the Ayn Rand story and the Koch brothers and the I did it alone stories. And they tend to, those I did it alone stories are delusional. But there's all these people who I would describe as they see the web, or they see the matrix of all the commonwealth that makes individual wealth possible. Once you see that the rest of society actually has built the fertile ground that makes this possible, then you have an obligation to pay that back. And part of the problem is this whole wealth defense industry that surrounds wealthy people, that perpetuates that myth and says, you know, Donald Trump, you know, I'll fix your taxes. You know, it's armies of accountants and planners and people who feed the delusion of individuals' wealth and work to maintain and perpetuate that system.
Right. Talk about the Commonwealth. This has been a through line in everything of yours that I've read. I haven't read all of your books, but I've read several of them. The Commonwealth is, most people, I think, particularly coming out of school these days, don't even know what the word means.
That's true. I mean, I think of the Commonwealth or the Commons. It's in a sense, it's the infrastructure, it's the property law protections, it's the things we do together as a society. It's the ecological wealth and the societal institutions, whether it's language or the internet. These are all things that actually no one individually owns and that no one can individually claim, ideally. I mean, there are wealthy people trying to grab that commonwealth and extract it. But that is the basis of wealth. And what I love about some of the people's stories I tell is they describe it better than many people because they're the beneficiaries of it.
For example?
Well, there's one guy, Martin Rothenberg, who talks about how, his wealth came from, he benefited from not having to pay for his own education, for infrastructure. He started a technology company that was built on a platform of public investments that made his wealth possible. He even had his intellectual property taken by, another company, and we have a process for resolving that dispute and protecting individual property rights.
Well, this is, I remember in one of your early books, if I'm remembering correctly, you referred to Bill Gates as kind of a welfare queen because he's benefiting from the copyright and trademark laws, which are basically government-subsidized monopolies. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so there is no private wealth without this framework that we all build together.
Right.
And there really isn't any wealth in a degraded ecological environment. But so, that's why it's important to disrupt the narrative of individual achievement, and no better way to do that with powerful storytellers, individuals who get up and testify that society made it all possible for them, and that's why you should raise taxes on people like me.
There you go.
Yeah.
The book is Born on Third Base. A one percenter, that would be Chuck, makes the case for tackling inequality, bringing wealth home, and committing to the common good. Chuck Collins, you're doing God's work. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thanks, Thom.
Great having you with us, and for writing this brilliant book, Born on Third Base. Check it out. Thank you. We'll be back with your calls after this.